Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming to today's Arts Talk in conjunction with the current exhibition. We have Shelia Chimes, Ed Kent, and Liz Heller with us. So they're each going to say a little bit about themselves and their work. So we'll let them speak in turn, and then we'll open it up for questions for all the artists. So let's give the three a warm welcome.
Well, first I'd like to thank Mike and Tina for inviting me to show this month, and just for creating this great gallery for established and emerging artists. Great working together. Just a little bit about myself. I went to Moore College of Art back in the 70s, and later, when it got into a lot of restaurant work, raised a family, and then decided it was time to get back into painting. So I took some classes at PAFA, and which were wonderful. Be back in the classroom with a lot of like-minded people. And but then came a time when I knew I needed to work at home and or in a studio, and which I have in my house, luckily. Spare room, and since I work from observation, I decided to do still lifes because I could set something up, it wouldn't be disturbed, the light would be constant. It seemed like a good idea at the time. So anyway, the problem came when I started setting up my still lifes because they were always bottom heavy. I tried putting patterns behind the still life. I couldn't get the right flow. It was just not enough movement, and I was really just stuck. And anyway, one day I'm in my basement where my husband has work tables, and he had just finished working on a project, fixing something, and things were scattered all over the table. And I thought, that's it, you know. So, and not only did I like the randomness of it, things were going off the table and pieces were kind of going corner to corner. There was a lot of movement, and so I couldn't work in the basement because he does deserve the space to himself. So I took a lot of these things, and which there are many of, stuck them in a box, went up to my room. I had a white piece of poster board, and basically I just tossed the box over, tweaked it a bit, and I started painting. And actually that junk drawer, the one that was on the postcard, is really kind of where I took off. And I really like working that shallow space, the bird's eye view. It's already framed by the table, but it doesn't mean that I have to use that as my frame. And anyway, I'm still kind of working it out today. I try to move away from the white and use like the map, a wooden table to just change it up. But basically, I'm still in that, working in that kind of space. And that's about it.
Liz, do you want to?
What I prepared to speak of, if I could stand in here, that would help, because I'm going to talk most about those. Okay, well, my name is Elizabeth Heller, and I went to community college and graduated in 2004, and then I went to the academy and graduated in 2008. My work is based on close observation of the natural world, but it is inspired by a deeper, more perceptive state, which starts in my emotions. As I look at certain arrangements of things or figures or other people, a special clarity or meaning emerges from my vision and compels me to record this unified beauty which I see. The allegiance I feel to direct observation is not meant to exclude any form of visual art. In fact, I enjoy looking at abstract painting and sculpture very much. However, after many years of painting and drawing part-time while working as a carpenter full-time, I found myself more drawn to painting from observation. I began to study painting and drawing more formally at community college and learned how to measure and how to observe colors and values. I also studied anatomy and proportion in the human figure, and I still do study that pretty regularly. Starting a painting or a sculpture feels like I am turning a key in order to enter a locked room. A room which I long to enter, yet often feel challenged to push the door open and begin. The mysterious patterns of light and shade, form, nuance of personality and shape recede as I pursue them. And I must start over many times to master my initial vision. And of course, sometimes I do and sometimes I don't. That initial starting part is very difficult for me, and I have to kind of persuade myself to start. In still life, the objects which I select and arrange have an emotional meaning and visual connections, and I hope that you see that in them. But the poetry of their arrangement is not always known to me when I start the painting. I often change the setups when they don't satisfy me initially. And as I work on the painting over many sittings, the visual rhythms and the emotional force of the image grow and come to fulfillment. The objects in each still life are not intended to communicate a literal narrative. A lot of people look at a painting of real objects and think that the objects can be connected, like if there's a letter and like for example, the great painting by Vermeer where the lady's opening a letter. And one of the wonderful things about the painting is the hidden narrative. It's a young woman with light, and she's opening a letter and reading it, and there's a mystery of a narrative in the painting. And it's a great painting. But my paintings, the narrative is not literal. It's more of a poetic accumulation of references that are visual. Because to me, visual art is mostly just visual, not literal, not narrative in the sense of what object it is, if that makes sense. Okay, so they hint at a poetic unity, which I wish to communicate. So this painting, Night in the Studio, came about when I left the sculpture I had made of the model who was named Genesis in my painting studio. At night, the sculpture began to seem more expressive. I would walk by and see it. I surrounded it with objects which were arranged to reinforce its significance in the painting. The colored vases, the red wax bird at her feet, the folded paper bag, the glass plate with oranges, and the shadow of the plate. They work, I hope that they work to strengthen the mystery of the darkly lit tableau. So all the objects are kind of worshiping the model. In sculpture, I start with observation and often do not have enough time with the living model. Right now I have 5 weeks, 5 3-hour poses with one model. I start with observation and I finish the head, hands, and feet from photographs and from anatomical models I have made or cast. So I have cast hands, and I have a model of the figure with all the muscles delineated, an écorché model, which is a figure without any skin on it. And that helps me locate certain muscle groups. But every muscle is different depending on what it's doing. So that is something that can only really be told from observation, in my opinion. So I try to keep that back and forth going, knowledge and observation. And obviously my knowledge needs to be bigger all the time. The knowledge of anatomy is key to understanding and expressing the unified visual language which is unique to that person. So whenever you see someone, like this model, her name was Genesis, which is, I've never met somebody with that name before. And she was very defiant and strong, and she really didn't like modeling, I think, because she disappeared after this post. I mean, she didn't do anything, irresponsible, but she never modeled again where I was doing figure sculpture. So I thought, did we wreck it for her? But she just didn't like it, So, anyway, And except for the small sculpture of Patti Smith over there, which was created from photographs and from my imagination, which is cast in aluminum with a mahogany base, my sculptures are modeled from life in clay and cast in hygrostone or hard plaster, and sometimes have added wood elements, like that sculpture there. When I work from the human figure, as in Portrait of Genesis, I experience a dialogue between the model and my spirit, between her stoic quiet and my observation of her appearance and personality. In other sculptures, like Shelter is the name of that sculpture, I enlarge a fragment from a form in the natural world, like the shape of a tree branch, into an abstract structure meant to communicate a poetic idea. It's a vague process, and it's hard. I mean, it's hard to, sort of like if you had a net and you were trying to get fish out of the sea, and the fish are your ideas or your poetic vision, and you just keep mining and sieving, and sometimes you get a good idea, and sometimes you get an idea that is not so good, and it's very difficult to suspend judgment, you know, and continue working, and just not always be saying, wow, that's just not that great, or, you know, I need to do better, but instead just be open to the things that are offered to you by the medium, or by the model, or by other people, other artists, you know. So that's, I don't want to talk too long. I have one more painting to talk about. What do you think?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, the last painting I wanted to talk about is Still Life with Summer Flowers, which is the one on the card. I set up the objects and the bases, and these are flowers in June in my garden, and then felt the need of a human presence in the composition. So I added the cast of my own right hand, which is wax, which I use for my hand sculptures, and which I added the makeup mirror supported by wire, which reflects my face. I feel attached to the mirror as I used it while attending community college to complete our assignment of a daily self-portrait drawing, often completing them at lunch or between jobs while sitting in my truck. So I would put the makeup mirror on the dashboard and draw, and we would come up with these little drawings, one a day, and that mirror came to be really, every time I look at it, I feel sort of happy, you know. The unity, also the wire seems like a schematic human figure, fragile and ephemeral, which is something, as I get older, I wish to put in my art. I wish to express, you know, the sort of both the fragility and the beauty of our human shape. The unity of the composition is made through repeating and contrasting color, echoing shapes, movements, and diagonal lines. So like this color is related to this color, and then the turquoise is related to this blue with turquoise in it, and the greens relate, and then there are these diagonal lines that I think make it a whole composition, and then there's movement throughout, so you continue to look at the whole thing. So I like that about that painting. So thank you all for coming to see the show and hear us speak today. And I appreciate the opportunity to share some of my thoughts with you.
Okay, my name is Ed Kett, and I want to thank the gallery for the opportunity. And as your email earlier in the year, I was actually thrilled. I said, wow, this is, I had a piece here 3 or 4 years ago, and I was like, I remembered it. But anyways, a little about myself. I'm retired. I retired about 5 years ago. And I started picking up a paintbrush just sort of on a small canvas watching the ball game. And you know, one thing led to another. I was always interested in art, but I never really did anything. It always fascinated me was colors and shapes and objects, advertising, signs, structures, architecture, bridges, all that stuff really amazed me, cars. I went crazy photographing tail lenses of cars. I have hundreds of those. I just found the shapes amazing, shapes and the colors and how they fit in. and I was going to the museums, and I started looking. I never thought there was a thing called assemblage art. I probably saw it and didn't realize it. And I started researching it, and I saw this piece by Louise Nevelson, and really I was impressed. And so I started looking into it, and then I started knowing other assemblage artwork around the country, because I did travel quite a bit. And I'd go to the museums, make sure I got all the museums. So I started doing this stuff. And this is one of my earlier pieces, although it's changed many times. The more I look at it, the more I want to change it. So but this one here has a face embedded in it, and I like to embed faces in it. I like the shapes and the arrangement, and the process is, it's fairly simple. Try to key on one item and maybe square off the corners, and then go from there and then rearrange. It may take 4 or 5 months, and I finally settle down on, okay, that looks good. And I start putting it together, and that's rather involved. There's a lot of technical issues with adhesives and glues and seals, and I don't want it to fall apart. And like one thing led to another, and I got this idea of convergence. I saw something, I can't remember where, so I started collecting components, and everything had a point on it. And they're all converging into the center. There's scalpel, scissors, pencils, nails, drill bits, you name it. And we started showing some of the work, and people would just stare and stare and stare. Well, that was really interesting to me, that they found that interesting, because people will look at it and they'll find things in there that they'll recognize. So there's kind of a mystery. There's always something in there you missed looking at it. And as a matter of fact, the piece that I sold here a couple of years ago, the people that bought it, they wanted to rename it because there was 3 faces in there, and I don't think they saw all of them when they bought it. And they sent me an email, they said, we want to rename it because of the 3, now there's 3 faces in there. It's up to you. I had to call them, some was 1, 2, 3, and 4. I really can't think of a good name for it. And I've done some small pieces on that wall. A lot of them are monochromatic, like this one. But I do like the color. But then again, sometimes just the plain, because what you're getting in here is there's actually the off-white, but there's a lot of shades in there, shadows and tones. So there's really a lot of values of white in there. And that one at the end has a little bit of red introduced. Actually, everything that is circular in shape got a little red highlight. And after a while, you try to think of different ways to present it. This piece over here, everything there, it's orthogonal, and everything is either rectangular or square. Those are objects that you can see. There's an outlet at the bottom, there's a camera. So all this stuff is just common stuff. This blue piece, I was trying to get away from, I wanted to use negative space and have the objects, like free form out. That's how this thing came to be. And I made a small unit like this, and I also have one in steel. This one I really like. This is kind of a new thing for me. I like that, the way that turned out. As you can see, there's parts in there. Most of this is plastic. And there's metal, and there's a carburetor top. There's an old 8mm projection reel. That's metal. There's computer parts. There's actually a little toy train at the bottom. They're all from, this here is from, interesting shape. This is from a wash machine. It's a pump inside a wash machine. I mean, inside the objects, there's a trove of things that have all kinds of shapes. And I really enjoy just looking at the shape. Actually, one of those shapes alone could be done, enlarged. And I've often thought of taking one of those objects and making it like very big and adding color to it. And then again, there's the one on the end, the orange one, which I picked up this grid, which is really a light diffuser for fluorescent lights. You can buy that stuff by the sheet at Home Depot. I liked it, and I've done a lot with that. It has a nice frame, it's different. And then there's a little bit of a abstract, that was actually a large abstract painting, and I sliced out a piece of it to match that. And the painting is actually parts that I used as a stamp to get that shape. That's what that is. And then this one here, the green one, that's my minimalist kick. I mean, I think I'm a minimalist at heart. Although you would think that if you look at this stuff. I have a series of those. I really like those. Not that they're easy to make, and they are, because it's just one object. But I like the hard edge feel, and I like the object, and it's up, and it has if you have a light on it coming from the side, it has a real interesting shadow. And the shadow changes as you move around it. So, and it's basically shapes, and the arrangement of shapes and objects, color, but then again, well, some of them are monochromatic. And I brought along some objects with a show and tell. This is the kind of thing, these are everyday objects, so you probably, can you tell me what that is? Oh, it's not, it's out of an old TV production set. Before the flat screens, they have a big box. This is an assembly, it's made out of metal. This is all the things that would project all the colors. I took it out of an old set, it was on the street, and that's where I find a lot of stuff. On the curb, or flea markets, state sales, even the junkyard. You'll see me in the junkyard a lot. This thing is really an interesting object. You know, take a look at it. It's it has a lot of potential. I don't know what to do with it because I've had it for 3 years. I don't know what to do with it yet, but I like to look at it. I may just leave it.
Yeah.
Make it bigger. That's light through that?
Yeah, you see that? It's loaded with lenses.
One out part,
There's
yeah.
still a lens in there.
How do you attach the functions? How do you attach the objects?
How do I attach it? Well, I use epoxy. Like we mix. There's some epoxies in the same way, two parts. There's several brands. There's one particular brand that I think is the best. Which, you know, there's several websites, industrial websites, that really go into the details of epoxy. But the key to any kind of adhesive is the surface that you're sticking it to. So all these little parts that get stuck, the surfaces that bond are abraded, roughed up, so the glue has something to bite into. There are some plastics that nothing sticks to. Nylon is really tough. But I've managed to put little holes in it, and I'll put screws in it, or I'll take one large part, and I'll overlap the surrounding parts, and I'll screw that large part, so it's sort of physically captivating.
Yeah.
And of course, I've done welding, that's actually the best. Not everything is metal. And a lot of these metals, like that particular piece, that's made out of it's a white metal. If you put a torch at that, it was just disintegrate. It's so fragile. But this is another little thing. I'm not sure what this came out of. It's an interesting shape. It's circular. It's got just nice holes around it, a little bit of a gear action on the edge. This one here, you probably all know what that is. If you make it
Percolator.
yeah, percolator. It's an interesting shape.
Makes the
And then this thing is, this is a really an abstract, irregular thing. Now I will eventually flatten that. And you can see I will flatten that and take maybe these posts out. It'll make for a pretty interesting object. It'll probably be a small minimalist shape. This is a bracket out of a large copy machine. A large one. I managed to buy one for like 25 bucks at a yard sale. I can hardly lift it. And there's a treasure trove of stuff in there.
Yeah.
Parts, motors, you name it. So,
The DeLonghi one, the big one. Oh,
So
so
there
Kind
was
of
a- there was
stuff, yeah,
large,
it's really big.
Yeah, and I broke that down into like 5 boxes of stuff. As
Whoa.
a matter of fact, there's a couple pieces of that are in that.
What did you retire from?
Where did I retire from?
What did you do?
Well, I was an engineer. I said, oh, okay, that's why you're really good. Yeah, almost 40 years as an engineer. And I kind of said, it's time for you to go away. You've been with us too long. But I had a very interesting career. I designed spacecraft. And communication
makes
equipment in
sense.
spacecraft.
Yeah.
And large antennas and microwave engineering. That alone, that type of engineering and design is very geometrical. You know, I don't know if you're familiar with electrical circuits, you have these components that are at the high frequencies, microwaves, it's all shape and cavities, and they're very geometric because if you're basically controlling the electromagnetic field, you can't see it. But, so you work on things you can't see, but the physical shape is, it's actually art. If you were to say Google microwave circuits, monolithic circuits, they're very small, but if you look at them large, there's fascinating patterns. Some symmetric, some not symmetric, and it, maybe look something like that. And that always fascinated me. And, but like I said, all through my life, I was always fascinated with stuff. And that's really the came of it. I really enjoy this work. But I do a lot of other woodwork and stuff. I have a couple cars that I've been working on, and I get parts out of those, and so I'm always busy. I always would have some sort of a sheet or something in the garage, and I would throw stuff on it, like these paintings. And I do my painting over that, and I look at the painting, and it was just to protect the table. It's an interesting piece of artwork. My brother said, that's art. Look at this. So then I got the habit of throwing stuff on the canvas and letting it stick. And they were in the garage, and so I've sort of done this over the years, but I never really sunk in to actually do it.
What kind of paint or primer do you use that adheres to both metal and plastic and wood? Like uniformly, gives you a nice uniform?
Well, I use this spray paint that you get from Home Depot.
Like Rust-Oleum or something? Like Rust-Oleum?
Rust-Oleum, there's another brand, there's Rust-Oleum, one other brand. Yeah, exactly, Crown. And they now have paints out that stick to plastic. They claim they do. And there are still plastics that they don't stick to. But again, I have to sand the surfaces so to give the paint a bite. Recently I've been experimenting with this marine epoxy paint. That's really great stuff, and it's very expensive. A small can like this is like $50. But that gives it, it's thick and forgiving, and that's really nice. But you have to have the respirator on, and the dry door open, and the fan going, because it really gas you out. There is a paint that I think Krylon makes. It's called Hammered. It's a hammered look.
Oh, yes,
All
yeah.
right, that's a great paint. That
Is
right
it-
there, that's done in hammered paint.
Oh, wow.
It's thick and gooey. It takes a while to harden, but it does a real good job. I really enjoy it.
Color
Again,
spray?
Spray. It's forgiving because it gives that hammered look. Unfortunately, it's only sold in about 5 different colors, like that, silver, black. And that's a brown, and I think a taupe, a taupe. A lot of it's spray paint. I have experimented with acrylic. Acrylic is not the thing to use, on metal and plastic and so forth. I'd have to paint it, and then I have to gesso it, and then put a lot of
You need lacquer
liner
right
on it and seal it, and it's much easier with a spray can. And also, I paint things after they're assembled, so I got to get down in all the nooks and crannies. Now, the marine paint, it's not in the spray, it's in cans, so I have trying to smudge it, and I dip though. And It looks like white chocolate, you know, it comes out. So it's actually a lot of experimentation, and my daughter says, "You're really an artist." I said, "No, I'm not. I call this experimenting." So to me, these are experiments, not artwork. But then again, that's how my brain works.
Well, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So speaking of color, was that a question for you about your color? I mean, I know you're responding to an observable world, but color choice placement seems like particularly important to you. The color seems like it almost enhances too, like it sort of glows and radiates like one next to the other.
Thank you. Well, I do love color very much. They seem to have like an emotion, each one. And sometimes there's an emotion because of two next to each other. But like that painting I did in artificial light, and this is actually a lamp with colored glass in the front that my brother gave Larry and I. And so there are probably 3 sources of light in the painting, but I guess to me, you know, the color is all intuitive. Like I don't ever think, you know, this should go with that or anything like that. But sometimes say this object might be 5 objects before I get that one. But I have light coming through a window, and all the colors are arranged in order, and they're all glass objects. And so I'll say like, that could be green, and then I pick 3 green things and put them on the side. And then I'll put them in. And then I look at it through a viewfinder that's the correct proportion. Like this is 16 by 20. So I have 16 by 20 rectangle cardboard. And I'll look at it and I'll think, that should come in a little bit, or that's too green, or that's too dark. And then when it seems pretty, you know, right, the objects seem to have like a personal meaning, and I don't know where it comes from. And part of it is the color, and part of it is the shape. Like those are garlic in a little netting, but they seem like little beings to me, like little animals. And they're crawling along, they're alive, you know, to me. And that's how the color makes that happen too, you know. It's like an emotional statement, you know. So it's very intuitive, I guess. Does that answer?
Again, thank you. Are there questions for any of the
What's
artists?
the orange creature going around us?
This one here?
Yeah, the orange.
Oh, this little octopus?
Yeah.
That guy came in at the last minute. I just sort of needed a little something. I didn't know what in it. Something that was totally, it's something more organic than it was. And I think that's, I thought maybe it created a little bit of tension in the whole thing, so it's crawling towards the center.
I thought it was leaving picture by
It's leaving?
crawling out.
Well, that's his eyes, he's looking that way, so I don't know. I'm not an expert on There's a couple other animals in there. There's a lizard, he's going to be the same. There are some people in there. This was this female here with the wings. That's actually from a trophy. She actually used to be gold at one time. Originally it was gold. I thought I would just airplane, light bulb, motor, spoon, another little airplane.
So what
Spring.
is your house look like?
There's a piece from the chest set. There's another airplane. And this frame, this is from the tabletop. I try to make my own frames, and this is a tabletop that I bought. The yard sale was about this thick, and I put it on a saw, and I got quite a few frames. Nice moving frames. Not something I could make easily. So whatever I find, I have one particular sculpture that I've actually shown it quite a few times. It's a piece of styrofoam. It's about this tall, and it was laying on the curb. It's from a wash machine package. It has a very interesting shape. I added some holes to it, and then I coated it with the resin so it's hard, and then I painted it different colors. And that one I want to keep because I really like that. It's a nice piece, but it's light as a feather. So I occasionally go back to that. It's an appliance shop down in South Jersey, and they dump all their stuff on the curb in a small town. Fix their stuff. And I go by there occasionally, and sometimes I see something interesting. Now there is a piece that someone had done. I saw it online. All large packaging styrofoam from large appliances, they're big pieces. He had strung all this stuff together on the wall. You may have seen this thing. It goes across the whole room. It's really an interesting thing. It looks like one of those over there, but it's all styrofoam packaging and boxes, and of course, everything has a different shape. And it's just white. And it's actually a nice piece of art. And it probably weighs like a feather.
Sheila, I have a question for you. So, I understand this is your first exhibition, is that true? Oh. Have you been hiding? So, your paint surface, I'm interested to know, it's got a very dry, almost matte finish, just regardless of what the object is, if it's going to shine. I mean, is that something?
You mean maybe my medium that I use?
Well, I'm just wondering,
Yeah.
are you striving for that, or just sort of getting rid of all
One thing that
illusion?
I have found very different about drawing and painting for me is that when I draw, usually bringing everything up at the same time. And when I paint, I really have a hard time painting on a surface that's already got paint on it. So I tend to move around the painting, which it's not how I ever thought I would end up painting. I mean, if I paint something in a day, I'll cover the whole thing. But most of these still lifes, and I don't know if because I have more time, then of course, you use the time that it just becomes longer amount of time. But I tend to work on a piece at a time. I don't work it all at the same time. I don't know if that affects my surface or not.
Do you draw, is there drawing underneath?
I draw underneath
In paint?
in paint.
Yeah.
And then
They have a mural-like quality, and I think that that surface adds to that. There's something
yeah.
really, works well.
Yeah. Well, I just don't like the surface when paint is dry. It gunks up everything that I put over it, and that's sort of how I ended up painting. Not how I thought I would end up painting, but that's the way it ended up. Yeah, I guess go from spot to spot, And I mean, if something's not working, I might take it off and put it on again many times till I feel satisfied. But it's not like it's all coming up at the same time.
Thank you. Are there other questions for anybody? Well, maybe we'll thank the artists and then you can sort of informally talk about it.